Hi, I'm Monica Poole from Pattern Poole Australia and welcome to our 4th Quilt As You Go video. So far we've shown you how to do the easy cover strip method, how to join a quilt together without sashing, the joining strip method, and how to make a crazy patchwork Quilt As You Go quilt. So in this video I'm going to show you another method that doesn't require sashing or joining strips, and I call this method the 1 to 3 method. I mainly use this technique when I design a quilt in rows. So I will have rows of patchwork and then I'll have rows of applique. I will quilt my rows of patchwork separately like this, and I will stitch all the way to the outer edges of that section. And then with my applique I will quilt my applique, and then I'm going to have some border strips sewn on either side, and those border strips will be free of any quilting. So I've just added borders along the edge of my applique because I like how it defines my applique. But you can cut panels any size that you like. You just have to make sure that there's a space of 2 inches along the edge that is free of any quilting. So this is the Georgina Rose quilt. And this is the Pretty Birds quilt, which is made using the same technique. You can see my rows of patchwork broken up with the rows of applique. So here's how it's done. For the sample I'm going to use the 3 blocks that I joined together using the easy cover strip method. You'll see that the quilting has been stitched all the way to the edge of these panels, and so I can't separate the 3 layers of the quilt. For the applique, I've got a sample already prepared where I have quilted in the middle of it, and I'll flip that over so you can see the quilting. But I haven't quilted out to my border strips here. So these strips are only about 2.5 inches wide. So you'll see that the edges are all level on this section here. And on this section here, I'm going to trim the batting just so that it extends 1/4 inch past my outer strips. Also make sure that your panels are trimmed to the same size before you join them together. To join them, take your applique panel and place it right sides together with your pieced panel. Separate the batting and the backing just so that you've got the top layer of your applique panel against the 3 layers. And this is why I call it the 1 to 3 method, because you've got 1 layer of fabric and we're going to pin that to 3 layers of our under section. When you pin, place your pins in crossways and pin about every 1.5 inches. The reason why I want the pinning to be at about 1.5 inches is because our top section may have a little bit of stretch in it. So that's going to help you to sew the top strip, the single layer, onto our quilted section without it stretching. So the seam with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, you can either use your walking foot or just a standard foot. To avoid getting ripples in the fabric, hold your fabric from behind and in front and hold it taut while you sew. Be careful when you're sewing across pins, and feel free to remove them if you don't want to sew across them. Turn your work to the front and press the seam. Now flip your work over to the back. You'll now see that the batting is too big, so we need to trim the backing. An easy way to trim the backing is to use a ruler and a lead pencil. Position the ruler so that it's butting up against the seam. You'll be able to feel that. And then mark a line. The next step is to trim the batting with scissors. Just coming along and cutting on your marked line. Have your hand positioned underneath just to avoid cutting accidents. The batting will now be butting up to the edge of the seam allowance. To join, you could either stitch the edge of the batting just to the seam allowance by hand using nice loose hand stitches. I'm actually going to use some batting joining tape. So batting joining tape is a thin nylon tape. It's rough on one side, so it's got a fusible glue. And this tape is 2 inches wide, so it's a little bit too wide. So I'm going to, first of all, trim a piece to the length that I need. And then I'm going to cut the batting joining tape in half. Now position the straight edge of the joining tape next to the stitching line, making sure that it doesn't extend past the stitching line. And because our batting joining tape is a nylon, we want to make sure that it's not going to melt underneath the iron, so we use our backing fabric to protect it, and we press. And here's our batting joined using the batting joining tape. We now need to fold the backing fabric under just so that it meets the stitching line. And you can hand sew that if you like, but if you would like to avoid hand sewing, what you can do is, using a fabric marker, mark along the edge of your backing fabric, marking 3/8 of an inch away from the edge. Next step is to fold the backing fabric over on that marked line. So we are basically folding our backing fabric over by 3/8 of an inch and pressing. When you overlap the backing fabric now, you'll see that the folded edge will just cover the stitching line, and it's going to overlap that stitching line by about 1/8 of an inch. Press it down flat again. Hold the folded edge down with a little bit of fabric glue. Now flip your work over to the right side and pin in the ditch, just making sure that you are catching in the edge of your backing fabric. Check to make sure that the pins have caught the backing fabric in on the back of the quilt, and then head to the machine to stitch in the ditch. And here are my two sections joined together, and this is what it looks like on the back. Now I must say, I could have actually folded my fabric edge under a little bit so I didn't have so much extending past my stitching line, but that's something I'll make sure I'll do next time. But a bit of a trick is to always make sure that you use a very busy patterned backing fabric so any imperfections aren't going to be seen. So that's the 1, 2, 3 method. Now all of the quilts that you see in my videos are available as patterns to purchase on my website, and we've got lots more Quilt As You Go videos coming up, so if you want to be notified when they're about to be released, make sure that you hit the big red button. Bye now.